Thank you, guys. Thank you, Creative Mornings. Thank you, Lyric Theater. Thanks, Cup and Holler folks, for all the goodies. And then thank you for all taking time out of your morning today. So, symmetry. When I first found out that this was going to be the word for the month, I had spent a bunch of time just thinking about it. And what I came to is that it's not just about mathematics. It's not just about science. It's about human connectivity. It's about how we connect with one another, how we connect with the universe. It's about reciprocity. It's about harmony. It's about you get what you gift. What you receive from this universe is completely aligned with what you gift to this universe. And I saw that in 3 different aspects of my life. One was my childhood, one was my time in corporate America, and one was the time in a coffee shop just down the street, where I learned that what's good for community is good for business, and what's good for business is good for community. So I want to time travel a little bit and take you back to when I was about 8 or 9 years old. A couple weeks ago, I had to call my mom and make sure I remembered these stories accurately, and I think I did. So the first one was when I was about 8 or 9, I was sitting in my parents' cozy bedroom. My mom was sitting on her waterbed, which is straight out of the 80s. I'm not sure if you guys know that. And we were watching the news. And on the news, they were talking about a presidential election, Clinton, Bush, Perot. And like a normal 8 or 9-year-old, I was anxious and stressed out about this. I've always been a political observer, a political junkie, and I get that from my parents. But my eyes started feeling really funny. So I ran downstairs, I went to the bathroom, I looked in the mirror and I saw my reflection. And my face was a little off kilter, was a little imbalanced. My eyelid had drooped down, I had this giant lazy eye. And as an adult, I have come to terms with the fact that if I get really stressed out, I get this lazy eye, and I've learned to mitigate stress, to make sure I have de-stressors in my life, and for the most part, just kind of get rid of that. As a kid, very different. As a kid, I thought my face was falling apart, so I freaked out. I ran back upstairs, I jumped on the waterbed, and I hugged my mom. And I look at her and I tell her, like, something's wrong with me. And she said, "No, mijo, there's nothing wrong with you." And I said, "No, there's something wrong with my eye," and I'm pointing to my eye, and she looks at it, and then she says, "No, you're perfect." And I said, "Except for my eye." Now, those of you that have Latina mothers, or you know of Latina mothers, you know that they're passionate, they're loving, they're caring, they're amazing, but there is a limit to their patience. And my mom's patience on a good day might be like here. On this day, it was like here. So when I said, "Except for my eye," she said, "Yep, you're right, except for your eye." And I let go of her, and I backed up and kind of confused. And then she said, "If there's something you don't like about yourself, or there's something you don't like about the world, you can change it, or you can accept it. But if you accept it, you have to deal with it. You don't get to cry about it. Now, you've had your cry, so be a big boy and have your get over it moment." And then she turned back to the TV. And I'm looking at her kind of annoyed, and I'm just seeing the side of her face. And as I'm staring at her, she says, "And don't ever cry over something as unimportant as your looks ever again." And she's the type of woman that doesn't let you wallow in self-pity. And I learned that that day. So she gifted. A few years later, when I'm in junior high, I started thinking I was kind of hot stuff. I learned that I could talk my way into good situations, talk my way out of bad situations. And I did it with my friends. I started doing it with teachers. And so I knew how to get good grades. And one particular instance, I had convinced a teacher that I needed more time to write an assignment. It was just because I didn't want to do it. It's not like anything was going on. And they gave me an extension. So I wrote the paper. It was like a one-page paper. I got 100. I didn't get reprimanded. I didn't get any points taken off. And I bragged to all my friends. They're like, oh, that's so cool. And then I came home and I was going to tell my mom. And at this point, I think my parents already knew that I thought this about myself, but they just kind of let me deal with it. And so I came into the house. My mom was sitting at the dining room. She was on one of our like broken dining room chairs. Like every one of our chairs had something wrong with it. I think that one had like 3.5 legs or something. And she was sipping a cup of coffee. And back then she drank coffee all day long. And so I tell her this and I'm thinking, this is so cool. And she looks up with a face full of disappointment, the complete opposite of what my friends had been giving me. And then she told me what narcissism was. And then she told me what humility was. And then she said, you know, when you're cute, clever, and charming, and you persuade and manipulate people to do what you want them to do, you let narcissism and ego guide you. And it was one of those things where I'm like, oh, I know, there's more to this. And I'm just staring at her. And then she said, but when you have a chance to be cute, clever, and charming, and you choose not to persuade or manipulate people, you let honesty and humility guide you. And then she took a sip of coffee, and she squinted her eyes. And at the time, I was thinking, like, I'm not sure if it's because the coffee's hot, or she wants to be dramatic. And as I've gotten older, I realized she just wanted to be dramatic to get to her last point. And then she said, but when you live under my roof, you'll do what I say. Don't ever do that again. And in that moment, she gave and she gifted. A few years later, when I was in high school, I came home and I saw this piece of jewelry that one of my mother's friends had given her. And it was made of beads. Most of them were dark royal blue beads. But there was one that was just a bright blue bead, just a mistake. And still in high school, I'm driven by ego, and I always had to be right. I always had to point out when someone else made a mistake. So I went over to my mom, who was reading the newspaper, and I said, did you know about this bead? She said, no. Or I'm sorry, she said, yes. And I said, did you tell your friend? And she said, no. Why not? Because she already knows about it. And I was really confused. And she said, well, if you look at the other pieces of jewelry she's given me, if you look at the dream catcher she's given me, if you look at the quilt she's given to me, all of them have something off. Maybe there's a pattern off. Maybe there's one less feather. Maybe there's a miscolored bead. Why? It's a reminder for herself and for all of her loved ones that nothing's perfect. Nobody's perfect. And I'm sitting there again, like she always like slaps me in the face with this cool wisdom. And I kind of like appreciated her friend for the first time and really wrapping my head around it because there's beauty in imperfection. There's beauty in asymmetry. So she gave, she gifted. And now some of you are probably thinking, like, where the heck is Sal's dad in all this? And he's not in any of these stories, but he actually is, just kind of more subtly. So my mother was born in the States, but that's only because my grandfather fought in the war and became an American citizen. My father was born in Mexico. He moved to the States in the 70s. He met my mother. They fell in love. They got married. Before my mother even turned 26, she had 6 children. By the time my parents were the age I stand on this stage, they had 6 children ranging in the ages of 10 to 19 years old. They were really young. They had tough choices to make. My dad worked long hours, day after day, to provide for our family. And he allowed my mother to be able to stay home because of that, and she was able to give these impactful, teachable moments that we may never have had. They didn't have the luxury to do what they wanted to do. They did what they had to do. They wanted to make sure that we had chances and opportunities that they never had. They weren't worried about what they would become. They were worried about what we would become. And unfortunately, they had a fear and doubt if they would ever be successful in life. And I think of like Emerson. I'm not sure if you guys know, but he has this really awesome definition of success. And there's a part of it that I've latched onto that I really think truly says success. And it basically is to have made one person breathe easier in life than you have succeeded. I breathe easier in life. My parents have succeeded through their sacrifices. They gave, they gifted. And past my young life, I look to my life in corporate America. When thousands of employees are counting on you, they're counting on your decisions, they're counting on your consistency, they're counting on your leadership. You learn to respect perfection and symmetry. You learn all the rules of business. I learned about merchandising, what the strike zone is, what the holding zone is, what the display zone is, why coloring and striping are important, why we use mirrors and glass in design, why we use gross margin return on investment as a metric, how we measure our turns, how we set up our grocery shelves to make it easier for the customer to shop, how we create an enjoyable, frictionless shopping experience. I learned about marketing and advertising through branding and rebranding projects for a lot of different companies. And the thing that I took away from that is most vital is it doesn't matter how perfect your mission statement is or your vision statement or your brand purpose. It doesn't matter how perfect you manage your social media. It doesn't matter what you tell your consumers or audience, because at the end of the day, the truth of the matter is it's about showing, not telling. People can see through it. They can see through carefully curated photographs. They can see through fake verbiage. They can see through empty promises. They can see through hollow missions. They want to know you. That's the whole idea of connection. That's what branding and marketing is. Past merchandising and marketing, I learned about operations and HR and finance. They're incredible mentors and bosses. Mentors and bosses from several different industries: retail, apparel, marketing, merchandising, HR, banking, obviously coffee. And what I realized is they poured into me all the time. I was really lucky, ever grateful. I mean, I was a young kid in my 20s, and they just gave me so much knowledge. These great mentors and bosses, they gave, they gifted. And past that, it was time to open a coffee shop. And what we did with the Cup of Commonwealth is that we threw out all the rules of business. We said hello to intentional chaos. We were purposeful. It was the aftermath of corporate America. When you walk into a Cup of Commonwealth, you'll see mismatched furniture, stained white walls, an uneven floor. If you look at our social media, you'll see photographs full of people smiling, sometimes filtered, sometimes not filtered. And if we are firing on all cylinders, you'll read verbiage from the heart, not what some marketing consultant or some marketing professor told us to write. You'll feel a brand, whether you like it or not. And if you pull back the curtains just a bit, you'll see the rawness and the authenticity of it all. You'll see mismatched furniture that was donated by a community, every single piece. You'll see stained white walls that were painted by customers and friends while they told stories to other customers and friends, paint rollers and paintbrushes in hand. You'll see an uneven floor, and you'll know the story of two best friends that jackhammered tile for a week just to get to that uneven floor. It's a shop the community built. The community gave. They gifted. If you pull back the curtain just a bit more, you'll hear of stories of a co-founder full of energy, high fives, and a spirit of celebration. And his impactful contributions still make a Cup of Commonwealth successful today. And if you throw those curtains back, you'll hear laughter, you'll hear sagacious words, you'll hear stories shared, you'll see people laughing and dancing, pay it forwards redeemed. You'll see an inclusive living room, maybe like some of your own, a hodgepodge full of photographs, quilts, heirlooms, passed down from one loved one to another. What I have found is that when you design something that is perfectly symmetrical, you can design people out of a space, whether you mean to or not. What I have found, when you design something that isn't perfectly symmetrical, it becomes inviting, it becomes tangible, it becomes inclusive. And inclusivity breeds community. Wherever there is imbalance, there is balance. Wherever there is imperfection, there is perfection. Wherever there is authenticity, there is beauty. Wherever there is asymmetry, there is symmetry. What I have found are the businesses and the people I respect the most share the same three pillars: community, service, and culture. Those same three pillars are the bedrock of a Cup of Commonwealth. Embrace community, serve others, create culture. That is a Cup of Commonwealth's mission. That is Chocolate Holler's mission. That is Magic Bean's mission. That has become my mission. It is etched on our walls, tattooed on our souls. I want to share one last story. This one is one that I think it's one of my most valuable lessons in life. It's one of profound moments of generosity, about tradition, and crazy little happenings. Roughly 5 years ago, we opened up the shop with an empty cash drawer, a broken window, and a trail of dollar bills up to Short Street. We were broken into in the middle of the night. We were gifted. We just didn't know it yet. After the windows were boarded up, Elf was watched a couple times. We waited for the opening baristas to arrive. And when they arrived, Chris, Haley, myself were like, we need to go home, we need to shower, need to get mentally prepared for this long day and come back. On my way back, it wasn't even 7 a.m. yet, Ashley, our shift lead, called me and said, "You won't believe what is happening." The first customer came in with a $20 bill, and he tried to pay for his coffee. And Ashley said, "Your drink's on us today. We have no money to give you." And he tried to understand what was happening, and she pointed over her shoulder to the broken window and let him know that we were broken into last night. And so the customer responded, "Put the money in the drawer." And then the second customer came in, and he had a $10 bill, and he tried to buy his coffee. And Ashley said, at this point, she knew that she couldn't give the money, so she just wanted to get the conversation over with. She said, "We were broken into last night. We don't have any money. Your coffee's on us today." And he said, "Put the money in that cash register." And then a third customer came in, and he had a card, but he knew what had happened, so he bought his drink, and then he bought a pay it forward. Any drink for anyone. By the time I got there, I was able to see some more moments of generosity. We saw a young man ride his bike all the way down to the shop and drop off a piggy bank. He said, "I have no money to give you, but I have this piggy bank for you to collect money for your broken window." Another man came with an envelope full of cash. People came with food, drinks, hugs, well wishes. We lost track of the outpouring of love. The community gave. They had our backs. We had only been open for 5 months, but they treated us as if we had been friends for decades. The community gifted. We were inspired by the compassion and the empathy. So we wanted to figure out what we could do. And we thought about, why would somebody break in? And we realized it's not because man is evil. It's not because someone needed a cheap thrill. It's not because we can't trust our fellow brothers and our fellow sisters. It's because somebody was lost. Somebody was desperate. It was their last recourse in life. Think about that. That's not a way to live. We are our brothers and sisters' keepers. We have to cast light on human decency and extend a helpful hand to potentially rescue someone from human desperation and human shame. So we took a dollar store tree and we dubbed it the community tree. And we invited anyone and everyone to drop off a gift for someone else, someone who may need to pay it forward, someone who may need a pick-me-up, or someone who's left wanting that holiday season. And then we took December 9th and we made it a holiday. It became our break-in day. And now it's a day that we give out free drinks to the city because when we needed them the most, they came through, and now we get to gift them a short moment each year. I love this story. And I love this story so much because a young girl studying late night in the library cast light on us in the form of gummy bears and plywood to board up a broken window. I love this story because when we were worried about how much money was in our bank account, the community cast light on a bright blue door and made sure we didn't have to worry about how much money was in our bank account. I love this story because when the community didn't have to give to anyone, they cast light on a dollar store community tree and they gave to everyone. I love this story because it reminded me that at that time, we didn't have much, but we had each other, and that's all we really needed. What all of these stories remind me is that a young boy can learn about beauty, balance, perfection, and symmetry from young parents who just want him to have a foundation, who just want him to breathe easier in life. What I have learned from these stories is that corporate America isn't completely evil. You can learn perfection and symmetry and consistency there. And on the inverse, you can learn from an unassuming mom-pa coffee shop and realize that imperfection and asymmetry are just as beautiful. What I've learned through these stories is that perfection isn't just symmetry, symmetry isn't just perfection. It's about human connection. It's about reciprocity. It's about harmony. It's about you get what you gift. I get to gift. And I can do that through support, through guidance, through forgiveness, because people before me have done it for me. These stories remind you that your personal values don't have to be sacrificed. They can be completely aligned with what you do in life. You get to gift. Hopefully, these stories remind our society, our government, our businesses, what's good for community is good for all of us. They get to gift. Hopefully, these stories remind us that we are called to love one another, called to serve one another, and to be there for one another. And when we move up in life, it is our duty to turn around and to help someone else up along with us through support, through guidance, and through forgiveness. Because like Althea Gibson once said, no matter what accomplishments you make, somebody helps you. No one in this world has ever not been helped. There's always someone there for you. We have to remember that. It is our privilege to make sure that we can make someone else breathe easier in life. We get to gift. We have to give until we can't give anymore, then give some more. It's a beautiful thing. It's harmonious. It's symmetry. It's humans connecting with one another, ensuring that we breathe easier in life, receiving from this universe, one gift at a time. Thank you all.